When it comes to classic health and shield tanking, one of the biggest upgrades you can get is the Adaptation mod. This will apply up to 90% damage resistance based on incoming damage, affecting both your health and your shields. Theoretically, this could improve your effective hit points and healing tenfold, but how effective is it really? I'm Nick Engineer, let's solve the practical problem. If the only reason you clicked on this video is to know if the Adaptation mod is any good, the answer is yes. So long as you have a few thousand hit points or enough of a damage reduction to effectively have that, it's an amazing mod. Of course, now you're here, you've got to know a bit more, so let's make sure you're up to speed on what exactly this mod does. When you are hit, such as weapons fire, enemy abilities, or even environmental effects, you gain a stack of adaptation to resist further incoming damage. The amount of resistance you gain is determined by the mod rank, between 5 and 10% per stack, while the maximum resistance of 90% is a fixed hard cap. However much resistance you have, it applies multiplicatively to other damage reduction options such as armor or abilities like Shatter Shield. This resistance will last for 10 to 20 seconds based on the mod rank, with the full stack timer resetting with each new stack. If the timer on a given damage type resistance expires, all of the stacks for that damage type are lost at the same time. Now, which damage type you resist is always the type that makes up the highest portion of the hit you received. For example, if you would take 100 damage, of which 80 damage is impact, 10 is slash and 10 is puncture, you would gain some resistance to impact damage. This remains true even if the adaptation resistance is making that damage smaller. At 90% impact resistance, that same 100 damage hit will be reduced to 8 impact damage, 10 slash and 10 puncture, yet it would still refresh the impact resistance. Adaptation as a defense has some weaknesses, such as against a high damage but low rate of fire attack. While a heavy gunner at level 100 will deal 106 damage per shot to shields, a level 100 charger can deal 1102 damage to shields in a single swipe. The next 1000 or so damage dealt from the heavy gunner would remove far fewer hit points, yet the second swipe from the charger will be at nearly full power. Even if you're a little bit into a mission and have taken a few hits, an enemy with a different damage type can crush you. An Ancient's Toxin Cloud or a Bombard Rocket Blast will often ignore the adaptation bonus as it's stacked onto a different damage type. You can't exactly gain stacks of resistance if you died to the first instance of the damage. Thankfully though, enemies with wildly different damage types are pretty obvious once you've got to the tier of unlocking adaptation, so taking them out and avoiding heavy hitters usually isn't that much of a problem. The less obvious question is how effective adaptation actually is against normal units. As I mentioned earlier, a 100 damage shot which is 80 impact, 10 slash and 10 puncture will still deal 28 damage when you've got maximum impact resistance. That's still 28% of the damage left over, a far cry from actually reducing your incoming damage by 90%. As it turns out, that's not a crazy example. I already referenced the level 100 heavy gunner dealing 106 damage to shields. That unit does 34 damage when you have max impact resistance. The reason for this is because the heavy gunner's damage is split into a ratio of roughly 6 impact to 1 slash and 1 puncture. You'll still be taking 32% damage versus heavy gunners than you would without adaptation. Other enemies have different damage distribution still. Elite Lancers have a ratio of roughly 2 impact, 2 slash and 1 puncture, proccing impact resistance on hit. With maxed out resistance from adaptation on impact, you're still taking nearly 2/3 of the damage from an Elite Lancer. Troopers on the other hand have more slash damage in their attacks, with each shotgun blast delivering 5 hits and therefore 5 procs to adaptation. Butchers deal just slash damage, while Scorpions deal just impact damage, and Nox deal only impact damage on direct hits and glob explosions, but the globs deal toxin damage over time, and Nox release a cloud of toxin when their helmet is broken or they die. This mix of units can both work in your favour and against you. If you've only taken damage from heavy gunners and elite lancers, a butcher managing to take a swing at you will be 10 times stronger than if you'd also received damage from troopers first. However, once you've taken the damage from troopers and butchers to increase your slash resistance, the damage you take from elite lancers drops from around 64% to just 29%, while from heavy gunners it drops from 32% to only 21%. In effect, allowing yourself to take a couple hits from a mix of units ends up making you stronger against the whole group of them. Mind you, killing enemies first is usually more effective. Now, as we all know, Warframe is a simple and consistent game with no hidden weirdness. As if to demonstrate just how much of a lie that is, while heavy gunners at level 100 will deal 106 damage to shields per hit, with most of it being impact, an arid heavy gunner on Mars will deal 140 damage to shields, with most of it being slash. At the same time, an arid trooper deals less damage than a normal trooper of the same level, and arid troopers switch from mostly slash to being a perfect split between slash, impact and puncture damage. Yet if you go back to Uranus and fight Drekar units, the Drekar heavy gunner goes back to the original stats, and the Drekar trooper is once again mostly slash, but this time with increased impact and lower puncture damage. Then you have the Elite Lancer, which deals a mix of mostly impact and slash damage normally, while the arid Elite Lancer does about the same, but for 1/3 more damage. Swing over to the Drekar variant, the Elite Drekar Lancer, and they deal about half the damage of the arid Elite Lancers, and for some reason, the damage is now mostly puncture. Basically, there's no consistency between variants of the same unit, and I can't find anything in game pointing out the different damage distributions. What this all means is that adaptation ends up having a different effect in different locations against different enemies. Against normal Grineer units, such as on Grineer Galleons and asteroid bases, adaptation will usually stack up impact very quickly, but slash protection will require you to take hits from troopers and butchers, which are less common units to get hit by. Usually you won't get puncture resistance, making adaptation only about 71 to 79% effective with impact and slash protection, or as low as 36% with just impact. On Mars, the effect is about the same, with many units giving impact resistance and a handful giving slash resistance. On Uranus, however, you can end up with a full suite of physical damage resistance if the right units spawn close together. This includes getting impact from the heavy gunners and from the Scorpions, slash from the butchers and the troopers, and then puncture resistance from the Elite Lancers. Typically though, you'd be safe to assume you're reducing damage by about 1/3 with only impact protection, or closer to 3/4 with 2 physical damage types at full stack. Changing faction entirely, the Corpus units prefer to use puncture damage. Techs, Elite Crewmen, Juno Deramoas, and Detron Crewmen for example, all have primarily puncture damage in their attacks, despite how different these units are. However, the Corpus do have some different damage units too, such as Disc Mowers doing magnetic damage, and Juno Nullifiers having an even split of physical damage, proccing impact protection with their attacks. With most Corpus units being puncture weighted, you'll typically resist about 2/3 of normal incoming attack damage, while the occasional pure magnetic unit can certainly wipe out a lot of hit points. As for the Infested, they have even less variety than the Corpus. Chargers, Leapers, Boilers, and even Ancients all have pure impact on their main melee attacks, meaning impact resistance will actually resist 90% of most infested damage. A few units have some slight variety though, which can get to you. Toxic Ancients have toxic damage on their range attack without triggering toxin resistance, and they create a deadly cloud of toxin when they get close. Ancient Disruptors will deal only magnetic damage with their range attack, but only impact damage with their stronger melee swipe. You've got Tar Mutilus Mowers, which will drop zones of corrosive damage, but when they throw the globs at you, they deal impact on a direct strike. This and other unit variety means that typically, adaptation will give you a full 90% resistance to basic infested attacks, but with zero preparedness for the more exotic special attacks they have. Adaptation's 90% damage reduction to incoming damage can seem like an amazing all-round buff to your defenses, however it seems that an ability granting 80% or even 70% damage reduction is going to be superior in the majority of circumstances. If you intend to dodge most attacks, or just need to be prepared for surprise heavy hits, don't factor in adaptation when figuring out your effective hit points and healing. If you do, you might be in for a nasty surprise. I hope this helps you better understand what adaptation is doing for you, and gives you an insight into the weird variety to be found in enemy damage. That's all from me for now though, so as always, if it doesn't kill you, adapt stronger, and fight well, Tenno.